Well, up there is my 1991 BMW 320i. That is an E30 and it is from Japan. If you're over there asking yourself why your undercarriage does not look like that, I suggest you click on this video here. Today we're going to be working on the rear end, subframe, trailing arm, bushing, suspension, all that good stuff. But if you're new here, we already did the front end and, well, it looks a little bit something like this. For the rear end, we're going to follow a very similar blueprint that we did for the front. So the subframe and the trailing arms were industrial blasted and then powder coated in semi-gloss black. If you're doing any sort of BMW restoration and you want to keep the OEM finish, it is semi-gloss. It's not gloss, it's not matte, and depending on the powder coating shop you're using, I wouldn't even say satin. The proper term is semi-gloss, if you even care. Now, everything is getting replaced on the rear end, either with an OEM option or an upgraded option. So first, we're going to start with the actual subframe and pushing in the condor bushings on each end. We'll get that up on the car, and then I'll kind of talk about each item as we install it, just because there's quite a bit of information here and I want to be as thorough as possible. So first things first, rear subframe up on the car. are the rear subframe bolts. There's a serrated part on the top. This goes in the car. There's a serrated section within the car under the rear seat. So you slide this in, give it a couple light taps with a hammer and it should slide into place. The rest will get pulled through when you slip on the nut. Here we have new OEM nuts. This goes through the bushing on the subframe into the car, tighten it. The torque spec on this is going to be 120 Newton meters. Next up are our trailing arms. These as well got the Condor reinforcement blade. We're using a much stronger, much thicker sway bar, so to have a weak point at the mounting point didn't make any sense. So we beefed everything up simultaneously. The first thing we're gonna do here is install our Condor bushings. Just like the subframe, they're two-piece, so they go in very easy with a little grease, and the thicker ends go on the outside. Before we throw this in the car, I just want to get the shocks in place and the springs ready. That way it's not a weird balancing act under there. It's very awkward. So this way I can just throw the bolts in, get everything held in place, and then go back and torque everything down. These are the OEM spring pads. I had these dry ice blasted, so they look pretty good. Just to realize that we're not actually using them, we're going to be using these on the upper and this on the lower. The suspension I'm using is ground control. The rear springs are adjustable, and this is how that's done. So this goes on the trailing arm. You kind of stick it down onto the nipple, and then I would obviously adjust, just like the collar on any other coilover. And then this one is going to go on the car on the top to replace that big one. These are a lot more rigid, both this and the adjuster. I don't know how I feel about that, but the idea is race car specs, so I guess this is race car stuff. These are the rear shocks that are going on the car. They are produced by Coney, but they're tuned to ground control specifications, as well as completely modified on the top end to ground control. So typically on a strut on an E30, you have your studs and they go up through the trunk of the E30, but this is reversed. It has this plate, so the studs go down and you actually mount it from the bottom, which is a lot more convenient. Also, it offers this reinforcement right here. But in addition to that, I am gonna add the Condor reinforcement as well, just as a stepping plate between them. I'm not welding this in, it's just gonna be between there to add even further reinforcement, because that is a very, very, very weak point on these cars. Then of course for hardware, these shocks come with the washer, and we're gonna hit it with a brand new OEM shock bolt. work is done now. The last thing to do is the sway bar from ST Suspension, and then I can show you guys what everything looks like. As you can see, there's quite a few parts that typically make up a pretty simple OEM system. A lot of this is focused on just reinforcing things, using better hardware, and overall a much stronger sway bar. So first thing we're gonna do, lube up these bushings, slide them on, and then get the actual sway bar on the car, and we can start assembling the end links. And I'll talk about those a little bit because we have two options here and I need to figure out what we're gonna do. Sway bars on the car took way longer than it probably looked on camera, and it was a huge pain, but regardless, it's in there. Torque down, 18 foot-pounds. Now we can move on to the links. So this is the link that ST provided with their sway bar kit. This is the link that ground control provided with the coilovers. This is billet. This is the one I want to run. However, it's wider and it only fits in the OEM mount. The problem with the OEM mount, first off, it's thinner metal, and also it has a stud in it, which isn't gonna go through all the reinforcement I'm using on that trailing arm where the bracket attaches to. So we're gonna use the ST mount, which you can see is much thicker. This gap is skinnier, and it uses a longer bolt. So this goes through the reinforcements, no problem. I just have to use the slightly less exciting ST link, which I'm sure is great quality. It's just not billet, which in theory is just a little bit cooler. However, not a problem. This is also a bit longer, which may become a problem later once the car is on the ground with its wheels, but we won't know till that happens. So I'm gonna keep the ground control and the OEM bracket in a bag, label it, write up my thoughts right now, and if I need to switch them out later on, I can figure something out where I either drill out the stud and add a longer bolt or completely fabricate something from scratch. Concludes the rear subframe assembly. Honestly, this is exactly what I wanted it to look like and be. There isn't really anything I would change at all, which is awesome. It feels very good. This is the foundation for the rest of the car, essentially, now that we have the rear and the front done. Next, we're gonna do hubs, wheel bearings, and brakes. The brakes are gonna be one of the more special items on the car, and I'm excited to get those on there and see what they look like and eventually how they perform. But until then, this is the rear subframe. Next video will be the brakes, and then I think the diff should be done pretty soon. Someone else is building it for me because it's way too complicated for me to try and figure out and film, so they built it and it's looking like it's gonna be perfect for this car to transfer engine power to the rear wheels, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and there'll be more E30 stuff coming soon.